Seth Meyers, Late Night with Seth Meyers, on the Emmy ballots that came out yesterday for the second year. And I've read an article. I wanted to start with it last week. I'm sure you read it as well, calling you the new political kingmaker.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Well, it was very, I think the question was, am I? I don't think it officially said that I was, but I will say it's nice to get attention for the fact that we're trying to have more political candidates, more political guests on the show. That's something that I'm drawn to. And we always find that those are the sort of guests, the sort of episodes that get a little bit more attention. So we'll continue to do them as long as we can get the guests to agree to come on.
Well, it couldn't be better timing either, especially for next year with all the presidential, the race and so forth. And Jon Stewart to be gone.
It's very exciting. There's a surplus. There's a surplus of choices.
Well, I hope they will, because I really enjoy your interviews, whether they're entertainers or whether they're other people, because you're one of the few people I've found in late night, especially, that really pays attention.
That's nice to hear. I mean, it was the part of the show that I was most concerned about coming into it because, I always pointed out on Weekend Update, when you're interviewing people, you always know what they're going to say because it's fully scripted. But I think one of the nicest things about the job has been that, listening is a skill you sort of have to have in comedy. You certainly have to have as an improviser, which was my background. And so reminding myself to listen has been one of the easier parts of the job. But I do feel like it makes for a better interview.
The one thing, too, and I hope as you have a lot of these political folks on over the next year and a half, with David Letterman going, I want you to have fun with them, but just as a viewer, I want you to grill these folks. He really did a good job of that, and I don't see that very often on especially like talk shows.
It's really an interesting balance because you have to remember that you're a host, and as a host, you have to be polite to a point. But at the same time, I agree with you that if it's just fun and games as far as the questions you ask, it won't feel like much anything of nutritional value to the viewer. I think part of what we want to do is balance both sides of it, get people to talk about, both, their political positions, and then see if there's any hypocrisy in there. But at the same time, make it the kind of place that they want to come back.
As you settled in over this last year and a quarter or so, I've enjoyed watching you kind of figure out along the way, which everybody does, what segments you like, what bits you like, the recurring ones, the ones you want to get rid of eventually. What has that process been like for you, just kind of figuring those things out?
Well, it's so, when you start these things, you have such a survival instinct. You just want to get the show on the air. You want to get through it. You want to feel that you're at a place where you're going to be able to keep doing the shows. The network's going to let you keep doing the shows. And then all of a sudden, one morning you wake up and you start value judging the stuff you do. And you realize there are things you're doing that you don't want to do anymore. And there are things you've only done one or two times that you want more pieces like that. So the nice thing is we have a very young writing staff. A lot of our writers, this is the first job in television they've had. And so it's been a lot easier to be able to put them in a direction based on work we've already done, as opposed to when we were sitting in a room before we even started doing the show saying, it's always hard with comedy when you say, I want to do comedy that makes people think this. Whereas after a while, when we actually have pieces, you can say, oh, that thing we did today, I really like that. I'd love to be able to do 2 or 3 of those any given week. And I think we're getting closer to that.
Any particular favorite among the recurring bits?
I really like You Burnt is a very fun thing for me. We're trying to do that every other week. It's just jokes, which I like telling jokes. Back in my day is a really fun piece that has a very small performance element, and I can only handle very small performance elements, so it's right in my comfort zone. And but for us, one of the things moving forward that's also been a lot of fun is trying to write day of pieces. Today we've got a show tonight. Donald Trump announces this afternoon. All of a sudden that becomes a story where you want to be the kind of show that can say something about that on any given night.
The other thing I like, I'm just full of praise here. Maybe I should get into some of the other things too, but
well, there's a lot of the other things are criticism, please.
No, another thing I like though is story time with Seth. When you come back from a weekend and you've got a big story from that weekend, or you've been on a trip and you're talking about your brother or your parents, or those, very few people can really deliver that kind of stuff the way you do. And I like I like that approach. I hope you enjoy doing that and you get good feedback on those.
I really enjoy doing them. We get great feedback. Sometimes the only pressure is when nothing interesting has happened. So it's going to be Monday and you'll show up and your producer will say, we'd love it if you had a story. And they only work when they're authentic. So, to be honest, my wife loves it because it's forcing me to go outside of my comfort zone in search of anecdotes. But it's nice. My dad, I would argue my dad is the world's greatest storyteller. I grew up listening to him talk about his life and his experiences, and it feels very comfortable when you get out of the monologue and you can sit down and you can actually say a thing that only you can say. It is a nice way to get the show started.
Another thing I hope you will continue and do, I guess you have to kind of spread these out, but the second chance theater, I hope that will continue to pop up here and there.
They are a little bit harder to pull off than we had originally thought, but we have a couple on the docket as long as we can get the cast together. Both Sudeikis, Forte have a couple other great options. But it is a really fun thing to do. Obviously my time at SNL was very formative for me, and it's really fun when old cast members, especially the cast members that I shared time with, come back. But it's even more fun when they do something like that we were both there for, sort of the shared history of how that comedy did not work.
Well, with the history of that show, it may be that, you could reach back even beyond your years and find some other cast members that might like to do that.
Yeah, I'm sure a Jim Downey or a Senator Al Franken probably have a few pieces they'd love to blow the dust off.
A couple of awards related questions I wanted to ask you about. You hosted the Emmys this past year. Kind of rate it for us. And from your perspective, was it good, great? Could use some work? What did you think?
I feel like it was a good hosting effort. I enjoyed doing it to a degree. It's a lot, in a weird way. It was a little bit more exciting to do something like the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Coming out for the Emmys, you're very aware that as a host, you actually are only responsible for a very small part of the evening. And almost as soon as your monologue's over, the show takes on the DNA of whoever's winning the awards and what the shows are. I feel like for the past few years with the Emmys, one of the criticisms has been that it feels like the same shows are winning every year, which then makes the night feel a little bit less exciting. Even when I feel like it'd be very hard to complain about the shows that are continuing to win. But, I really like doing a monologue. I really like doing the thing I did with Billy Eichner, which was great. And he was a delight to work with. But for me, it was one of those things when it was over, I will admit that I was kind of happy that I got to just go back to start doing my show again.
Well, yeah, that's a lot more work than people realize, just the weeks preparing. Would it be something you would want to do again?
I'd hate to say, never to any of these things. I will say I'm very happy. It's one of those things where you can't even be in the running unless your network is the one to have it. So it kind of gets to take a breath.
It's every 4-year thing for you.
Exactly. That nobody's going to even think to ask me for another 3 years. So I will say I'm happy about that.
Like most things in life, by the time you get past, 3 years of not doing it, you forget the bad stuff and you only remember the good stuff.
I think that is a very, very valid point.
I've had this feeling for the last few weeks, and you can deny it or with Tina and Amy leaving the Golden Globes and that being on NBC, I have this feeling that you may be the new host of that.
I personally, having worked with those two women, and I have wrote backstage with them on that show, I would never want to follow them. I think that sometimes you just have to. I think the Globes would be a really fun show to do, but I really tip my cap to anyone who takes it on in the years.
Somebody's going to have to.
Somebody will have to, but it will not be me.
Well, in addition to your show, you're on the Emmy ballot, for writing the Globes. You could win an Emmy for that.
Yeah, that would be nice. I would, for me, the thrill of doing that versus other jobs I've had over the years is anytime you can sort of have a reunion with people you used to work with before, coming back and getting to write jokes for Amy and Tina again was worth more than any award we could win. With that said, I really hope we win one, and I think everybody should vote for us.
Well, speaking of winning Emmys, I apologize, I can't remember who it was. You had somebody on a few months ago, and you got tickled about the fact that you had won. Your only Emmy was for music.
Yes.
They had won something for acting or something like that. I don't know who that was, but
I can't remember either. But yeah, we John Mulaney, the great John Mulaney, and I won a song and a music and lyrics Emmy for writing a monologue song for Justin Timberlake.
Yeah, that's your Emmy.
That's my Emmy. It turns out when my name is on the same, when you can both tick Justin Timberlake's name and I'm in just the tick zone, basically, like that vote also counts for me. That turns out that's how I best win Emmys.
I love that you mentioned the White House Correspondents' Dinner too. I had Joel McHale on Friday, and he did that a couple of years ago.
Yeah, he was great.
But I heard the reason I brought it up with him was I'd heard Stephen Colbert on a show, might have been that the David Steinberg show, the Inside Comedy Show, talking about what he didn't realize and what his friends didn't realize was that the room is not mic'd. So while he heard tons of laughter standing there doing his thing, when he talked to people at home after who were watching it on TV, thought he was bombing.
Yeah, I think I was aware. I try to, when I do something like that, I work very hard to watch a lot of old ones. So I had the sense when you watch really funny people and you realize how bad the sound is, you just kind of say, okay, this is not going to be a normal comedy performance. The standard for what will count as killing in this room is going to be very different, because the mic'd part of it's only one part. The other part is it's the worst situation in a room for comedy I've ever been in. There's so many tables. It's a really long room as opposed to a deep room. There's two giant screens, so I would say only about a third of the people are actually looking at you. The rest of the people are looking at the screens. Not to mention the fact that in the end of the day, it's probably more interesting to watch the president watch you than it is to watch you directly. So I was very aware that usually when you're, at a podium and you have a microphone, you usually can feel everybody looking at you. That was a night where I got the sense, eyes are everywhere. People are chattering. So you sort of say, any sort of success here will be quite a success.
I was looking on Wikipedia when I was getting ready for Joel, and as I looked down the host list, it occurred to me that I don't think anybody's ever done that twice.
Yeah, you know what?
For the reasons you just said.
I think Conan's done it twice now, and I think when he did it recently, that was the second time. Al Franken, back-to-back years, because he was someone I talked to back when I was doing it. So I think back in the 90s in the Clinton years, Senator Franken did it a couple times.
Well, speaking of him, SNL 40th a few months ago, I've been a fan of that show since the beginning. I was like 7 when it started. And I can't imagine all of those people in one place. What were your thoughts leading up to that particular weekend, and then what happened? What maybe a favorite memory for you?
Well, it was again, Lauren had asked me to help out a little bit, so and I was happy that I was also helping with the writing on it, because then for me it kind of felt like the last SNL I would ever work on, and it was certainly fitting for that. It was, so I both had the excitement of being there, but also the pressure of wanting, as a writer, wanting your stuff to go well, especially because you could never blame it on the cast that was performing it that night. It was the all-star of all-star casts. The joy was just how, even just to getting to your seat, you had to pass by 15 people that were more famous than you ever thought you'd meet, and just the logistics of space. Because I can't remember the last time, Keith Richards waited in line for anything. But that was what was so great about the night, is no one could act, and no one could big time it. Everybody had to sort of act like a regular person, which I think is why everybody was having the time of their lives. Is not for someone like me, but for someone who has been so famous for so long, to be somewhere where they could actually talk to people and not feel like the press of being a celebrity, I think was really special.
And you got tickled with was it 4 of you weekend, the male weekend makers, and was it Norm Macdonald that got you all tickled?
Yeah, I mean, I love Norm. He's I believe he's the Weekend Update anchor, and it was really funny because Norm just started going off script, and I just started giggling, mostly because I couldn't believe because standing up there with Colin and Kevin and Norm, but also I was just laughing at the fact that I thought Norm would do it according to script, like how silly I was to think that he wouldn't just go off script. But it was wonderful. It was a real pinch yourself night from start to finish, and I was very happy to be there.
Well, you said something about final time, but I can't imagine that you wouldn't be back like as a guest host at some point in the near future.
We'll see. But if you look back at my sketch work on SNL, unless they want a host to just come out and do Weekend Update for 90 minutes, they can probably do a lot better than me.
Well, they've hidden hosts before.
Yeah, that's true. And actually, as an ex-head writer,
you like one of the sports stars.
I know how to hide them.
No, I'm just kidding. I liked your sketch work. I truly remember when you took over, Weekend Update, and it kind of, we all kind of realized, well, he won't be, or maybe you even announced you wouldn't be in really any many sketches anymore, if any. And I just thought I was going to miss you doing some of that stuff.
But that's very kind of you to say. You were in a very small fraternity with my mother and father.
Well, you guest host, you invite me, I'll come and
thank you. Yeah, I don't want to stack the crowd that night.
What else, we talked right before we started, what else is on the in the pipeline and also on the Emmy ballot this year for you? I know you've got several projects.
I got several projects. I guess on the Emmy ballot this year, The Awesomes, which is the show I have with Mike Shoemaker on Hulu, will be in the animated category, and we're very excited. Excited certainly to be on the Emmy ballot. Even more excited that our season 3 is going to start on Hulu in September. That's been just a really fun thing for somebody who grew up loving superheroes to actually have a animated project like that. Has been a good use of what little off time I have.
I imagine some of your voiceover people are on that category too.
Yeah, I think, it's weird. I can't remember how it works with the Emmys if we have to pick just a couple to submit, but we have an incredible voice cast. So many standouts, from Bill Hader to Maya Rudolph to Kenan Thompson, Amy Poehler. People who, I think are, certainly going to be the first choice of Pixar movies, and yet we are getting them to do it as a favor for, little to no money. So it's been, our Rolodex has been very helpful for us through the whole process with The Awesomes.
I'm sure they are. That's one of the few. That's a juried category, so they don't actually have a ballot. It's like something they have internally that you've submitted your stuff, but people like me, we don't know, and then they just announce who the nominees are over in July. So we don't know either.
Well, it'll be. I'll wait with bated breath for July. We certainly have some deserving candidates there.
And you, what was the other one you mentioned to me right before we started?
Well, that would be hopefully for next year, but in August 20th, I have a show with Bill Hader and Fred Armisen. It's been so fun to collaborate with those guys again, called Documentary Now, that's going to premiere on IFC, that I'm very, very excited about.
Yeah, I was reading about that in one of the magazines. Tell us just a little snippet of what's that going to be? The
conceit is that this show, Documentary Now, is a documentary show that's been on television for 50 years, and this is the 50th anniversary of it. And this is a show that these are the 6 best documentaries of the past 50 years. And we worked with our great SNL director, Rhys Thomas, and his cinematographer, Alex Buono, and they're just brilliant. So stuff, we have documentaries from the 20s that are supposed to look like the 20s, stuff from the 60s that's supposed to look like the 60s. And best of all, we have Helen Mirren introducing each episode. So that.
Oh wow! Like a PBS, a real life PBS kind of a thing.
She's our Laura Linney, yeah.
Well, it's been a real pleasure. I've been a fan of yours for a long time, and good luck on all of these different categories. I hope you're able to get some of those nominations.
I thank you very much. I really appreciate it, and we're going to get you in the audience when I host SNL.
Well, I can't wait.
Thanks.